Hey folks, welcome back for part 3 of my engine assembly saga that I've got going on here. With any luck, this will be the actual last video of assembly of all of these parts. So hopefully by the time I'm done with this video, this unit is all one piece and ready to go in the truck. And if that all pans out, maybe the next video will actually be an install video of getting this thing bolted into Midnight Panic. Now as you can see behind me, I actually have the heads bolted onto the short block. I was going to time lapse that, but there was no point in sharing another 30 seconds of me pulling on a torque wrench, because that's basically all that's going on as far as installing these heads. You can also see that I have the intake manifold sitting on there, and that is in fact just sitting in place. There's a few things that I have to do to that part before I can actually bolt it on for good, and that's where I'm going to start this video. So I'm going to flip the camera around and show you what I got to do there before getting started. Like I said, I've just got this intake manifold sitting on here, getting an idea of what I need to do to make it fit this engine properly. This piece I bought on eBay several years ago. It was a really good deal, and I'm sure it is made in China. I have little doubt that it's made overseas. And there's a few issues with it. It's a pretty nice piece for the most part, but there's a couple things that I need to work on. So first of all, you can see it's almost like there's a core shift here. Like it wasn't in the jig quite properly when they machined all of the mounting holes. So you can see this one's offset a little bit. As I pointed out, that one is obviously offset in that cast boss there. And you can see this one here is the same. If we switch over to the other side, that is also the same. So you can tell this manifold just wasn't quite in the jig or in the machine correctly when they did it. I thought maybe it was kind of a blemish. Maybe that's why I got such a good deal on it. But I have seen bigger name companies that sell this type of product for motorsports use, and they are the same. They have the same core shift. They have the same issues. I'm pretty certain that that company is just having these made or buying them from the same company I did. Either way, like I said, this is shifted one direction. And if you look down on the ports, you can see, so let's say you can see this thing is shifted, moving the manifold forward from where it really should be. And if you look in the ports, that also reflects that the manifold is sitting farther forward than it should be. If we switch around to the other side, it shows exactly the same thing, maybe even a little more so. Now, if we take and shove this manifold forward, or actually back, excuse me, to where the bolt hole in the head would line up more centered in this boss. I pushed it back just a little bit, and you can see how much better the ports line up. Obviously, you can see a little bit of the port floor in the head is sticking up there, but remember, there are no gaskets between the manifold and the head right now. So by the time you install your intake manifold gaskets, that port is going to be lined up really pretty good. And on the other side of the engine, we're looking at pretty close. You can see there's still a little bit of port misalignment there. It's pretty minimal for the most part. So that is one of the things I'm going to do, is try and adjust these bolt holes a little bit, if possible, in the manifold itself to line up better on the head. Another thing that I'm going to look at doing on this manifold is sealing on the top side where the blower mounts up here. Typically there is a gasket that is used to seal the blower to the manifold, which is fine. That works well. There's nothing wrong with this system. But I've never really been a huge fan of the gasket myself personally. It's just another piece that is, stacked in here between the blower and the manifold. You've got basically a piece of gasket material between those two nice machine surfaces. I think there's room for improvement there. And other manufacturers feel the same way, because there are other manifolds that are built with, rather than a gasket, they will actually machine a groove in here for an O-ring. Then you can have your blower sitting directly on here and not have to worry about any material in between the two components, and the O-ring actually does the sealing portion. Now you cut your O-ring groove, and then you can buy rolls of this O-ring material or O-ring cord in different types of material, and then you just build your own O-ring, lay it in there, and that works really good. That way, if you're, have to shift the blower around a little bit to get everything lined up, you're not damaging the gasket, you don't have any issues there. Later on, if I were to say I was to take my 1471 and bolt on this manifold, that blower actually has to be put on a setback plate, and your setback plate basically fits this bolt pattern, and it has its own matching pattern that is, say, 2 inches back from this one, and it's a 1/2 inch aluminum plate. So say if you're going to put a setback plate on here with a gasket, you would have the manifold, gasket, setback plate, gasket, then your blower. So you're getting all this stuff really just stacked up in a big old mess. If I were to do a setback plate, I would have my O-ring here, and I would also O-ring groove the setback plate. So then you just have aluminum to aluminum, and then your blower. And there is no gaskets, you have less stack and buildup. And it's just a cleaner setup in my opinion. So that's the goal. I'm going to set this thing up in the mill, try and fix this mess here a little bit, and put an O-ring groove in here. I need to double check and make sure that this opening comes far enough forward to match my new blower. If it doesn't, I will go ahead and open that up while I have this thing all set up in the mill. So that's what I'm going to work on now. I've got the machine work pretty well wrapped up on this intake manifold. As you can see, I've got that O-ring groove in there. Take place of that gasket. I did end up taking about 140 thousandths off of each side of the opening for this manifold to match the opening in the bottom of the blower. That's all done. Shifting these bolt holes was kind of challenging. I did them actually upside down, had the manifold on the mill upside down and come up through the bottom. Shifted those holes a bit. These ones that were on an angle, I just opened them a little bit with a die grinder. And some of these holes where the bolt head sits down, some of them were set up, they were countersunk for an Allen head fastener. I didn't want to deal with that, especially since moving these holes around, that kind of put a kink in the works there. So I actually just machined the top of this boss off, took that countersink out, but I wasn't able to do that here on the front holes. These were also set up for an Allen head bolt. So what I ended up doing when I shifted the hole over, it kind of got close to the edge, and by the time you get a countersunk, with the right diameter, countersink for the Allen head bolt, you wind up with the bolt really not having a lot of material to seat against. So I went ahead and just threw a 3/4 end mill in there, centered up on the new hole, and basically countersunk it only in a bigger diameter. And then I took and built a couple of basically just filler spacers that will go in place of that. Now I can use a stud here in the front corner like it's supposed to have, put a washer on there, and you know, it's just a lot cleaner, I think. So that part's done. I got all the holes drilled for the port nozzles, which I don't think I'll be running on this engine, but at least they're there. If I decide later on that we're going to do something and we need more fuel, all I have to do is thread in the nozzle holders and we're good to go. As for now, they will just be pipe plugs. And then the alignment in the port turned out pretty decent. I think I can live with that. Now I believe I've got all of my fastener stuff sorted out, what bolts I need to use, what lengths, everything's good to go there. But before I install this manifold, I think I want to go ahead and powder coat it. As you can see, there's a little bit of corrosion from this thing getting a little moisture on it when it was on the mock-up engine in the truck as I built that chassis. And this is just kind of the nature of these cast aluminum manifolds. You can take really good care of them, but they're hard to clean, and eventually there's going to be areas that look like that. The manifold that is on the truck now is powder coated gray to match, you know, parts of the truck, and it is really slick and easy to clean. So I mean, if it doesn't pressure wash off, a little Windex and a rag and it will clean right up. They look good. So I want to powder coat this manifold before I actually install it. Now normally I would drop this thing off with my local powder coat guy. He does awesome work, and he hooks me up with a good deal, and he always, you know, gets stuff done quick. The problem is I still have 3 days off. I would like to have this thing bolted on here and done before I go back to work, and I can't go drop the thing off this morning and ask him if I can have it tonight. That's just not going to work out. If I was in a position to where I could just wait for next days off, I can almost guarantee it would be done by then and ready to go. I'm just being a little impatient. I do have your typical do-it-yourself Eastwood powder coat gun, but as most of you know, if you're a car enthusiast watching this video, you understand that your regular oven and dishwasher is always just a little bit too short to do these kind of jobs. So I think I have a plan for that. In my office here, I have an oven that I use strictly for powder coating. And that big manifold isn't going to fit in there. But I'm thinking maybe if I do an addition off the front of my oven, then I could do those parts like intake manifolds, oil pans, valve covers, that kind of stuff that is just a little bit too big to fit in that oven. My dad's got a pallet full of 16 gauge 1-inch tube down there at his place. I think I'll go steal a couple sticks. And then I believe I've got a half a sheet of 16 gauge steel here and enough R-Max insulation. I think I can slap something together today. And yeah, maybe I'll be able to powder coat that thing myself and have it wrapped up by the end of the day anyway. That did end up taking a little longer than planned, but not too bad. So I got the frame and the inner tin work all done last night. I just ran out of Armax, or I didn't actually have enough Armax to do this job. So this insulation here is basically a fireproof foam in this aluminum foil front and back. I had less than half a sheet, so I had to go to town this morning and buy a whole sheet to do this project. But now it's there, and it looks like it should work pretty good, really. I might do something a little more permanent on my little support there, but that'll be easy enough. I'm pretty sure that intake manifold will fit in there now. See if I can get it in color without messing it up. Powder coating went well. As a matter of fact, it went so well that I didn't even slow down to do any videoing once the powder coat was complete. I just threw the manifold on the bench and went right to getting everything plugged up where it needs to be plugged up. Got all the fittings and whatnot installed. Backfire valve, everything's in place. Now, this engine is not going to run the port nozzles for the mechanical fuel injection, but since I had already drilled and tapped all of the ports for the nozzles, I was actually going to just pipe plug these and leave them as is. But I'd already ordered these nozzle holders and had them sitting here. I figured I better just go ahead and install them now because they actually have to be oriented. They're kind of a funny looking nozzle and it directs the fuel into the port when you're using those. Since I had them, I went ahead and installed them. That way, you know, if by chance down the road, if the 1471 supercharger ends up on this engine, I would have to use the port injection, the port nozzles on this manifold to run that setup. So now basically it's just a matter of putting the jets in each one and hooking up the hoses and it's ready to go. No fussing around with it. Got the blower on there. Everything looks good there. I've got it measured up for a snout. I will get that ordered before the end of the week. And should be getting pretty close. I didn't quite make it to the point of being ready to install the truck, but it is getting really close. About the only thing left on the engine itself is rocker arms, valve train. I still have to install that stuff. But if I install the rockers, push rods, stud girdles, if I get all that stuff put on, then you run the engine and then you have to take all of that stuff back off to retorque the heads, which in the instructions for these copper head gaskets, I do have to do a retorque on the heads. So what I'm going to try and do early in my next days off is actually maybe try and rig up some kind of contraption where I can circulate water through this engine and get it up to an operating temperature. and maybe do a heat cycle or two, and then retorque the heads, and then I can put the valve train on one time and be done with it and bolt the engine in. Hopefully I won't have to disassemble any valve train or redo any rockers, any of that. Bolt it in, fire it up, set the timing, do a little fuel trim, and let her rip. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video. Like I said, I didn't quite meet the goal that I wanted, but if I keep setting the goals high and come up just a little short, I guess I'm still gaining ground. I do have a little bit bigger powder coating oven, which that is convenient. It was maybe a little slow. I think this big old chunk of aluminum here is maybe pushing the limits of that tool. But I can't complain since I pretty much, doubled the cubic feet that can fit in that oven. It did get the job done. It did a really nice job. And now if I have something come up, even though it ate one of my days off this week, at least now I have it on hand and I will be able to use it anytime. So anyway, until next week, thanks for watching. Have a good one. And then the alignment in the port turned out pretty decent. Oops.